Hello again. During the 1930s, the Nazis were very fond of measuring parts of people's bodies so that they could decide to what race they belonged. This was a popular means of assigning people to their proper place in the order of things, whether as Aryans or Jews, Slavs or Gypsies, Alpine Europeans or Mediterraneans. The Germans, of course, didn't invent this nonsense. It was popular all over the world. Sometimes they would measure noses, and at other times they would calculate cephalic indices, which is obtained by dividing the length of a skull by its breadth. The Nazis made such extensive use of techniques of this kind when working out which citizens were Aryan so that they could distinguish them from others who were subhuman, that because of this, measuring cephalic indices in this way rather fell into disuse after the end of the Second World War. When in the Third Reich, it could mean the difference between life and death, having the wrong cephalic index. Such measurements were at best pointless, and at worst used for wicked purposes. Viewers may be surprised to learn that a form of this craniometry, as it was called, has now been rehabilitated and is being enthusiastically embraced by campaigners for anti-racism. To see the return of calipers and careful measurement to determine the racial group to which a human skull ought to be assigned is more than a little disconcerting. To understand how racial classification of this kind has made an unwelcome return, a little background information will be necessary. In the United Kingdom, strenuous efforts are being made to prove that black people have always lived in the British Isles and that their presence dates back thousands of years before the arrival of the first wave of post-war immigration from the Caribbean in the late 1940s. This, it is felt, will help everybody in the country to accept that diversity is no new phenomenon, but rather part of the tapestry of British history from the earliest times. It is clear that this kind of thing might enhance the self-respect of black children, but to achieve the goal a certain amount of deception is required. There is, of course, no actual evidence of any black Africans in the country before the 16th century, and then only the occasional musician or servant, so the old system of craniometry has been resurrected for the 21st century. Consider the case of the so-called ivory bangle lady. In the northern English city of York in 1901, a stone coffin was unearthed. It dated from the 4th century AD, the time when Britain was part of the Roman Empire, and it contained the skeleton of a young woman, together with various grave goods. Among the items found in the coffin were ivory bangles, a glass bracelet, and a mirror. These all suggested that the body had been that of somebody of high status, and not a slave or ordinary working person. It was the presence of the bangles which caused the remains to be labelled in later years the ivory bangle lady. This skeleton has become transformed into something of a leitmotif for modern Britain. According to popular mythology today, including the Guardian newspaper, which said in 2010 this was a woman of black African ancestry, the same claim is made in many children's history books as well. According to these people, the ivory bangle lady is African, black African. The York Museum's reconstruction of her may be seen in the thumbnail to this video. She is shown as being black. This is it. This is the received wisdom. This is the skull of a black woman. What are we to make of all this? What actual evidence is there? The answer is that some people from the University of Reading in the south of England undertook to measure the bones, especially the front of the skull, so that they could decide what race the woman had belonged to when she was alive. Having heard what I've just said about craniometry and cephalic indices, perhaps viewers will have formed the impression that it's a pretty useless way of determining racial or ethnic origins. Everybody in the field of anthropology is aware of the shortcomings of this technique. At least one might think so, but where racial matters are concerned, people are inclined to turn a blind eye if it's in a good cause. Again, I mentioned pious frauds a few days ago. This is a similar thing. Those engaged in these practices know that they're being dishonest, but they feel it's in a good cause. The researchers at Reading University studied the skeleton of ivory bangle lady using a computer program called 4DISC, which is designed to aid forensic scientists in archaeology to determine the ethnic origin of skeletons. Obviously, if it were possible to state reliably whether the skeleton of an unknown murder victim belonged to a black person or white, or somebody from East Asia, or a person of mixed black and white ancestry, then this would be of inestimable use to a police force investigating an historic murder. Using 4DISC, though, in this way, other than within very specific parameters, is all but useless. Even within those parameters, in optimal circumstances, it is successful in only one case in 100 in dividing the ethnicity of a skull. One need only read a study which ran 200 skeletons of known ancestry through the 4DISC program and then collated the results. The findings are damning. We read, the results of the analyses suggest that 4DISC's utility in research and medico-legal context is limited. 4DISC will only return a correct ancestry attribution when an unidentified specimen is more or less complete and belongs to one of the populations represented in the program's reference samples. Even then, 4DISC can be expected to classify no more than 1% of specimens with confidence. I give a reference to this in the description to this video. Of course, the same system is used to back claims that the so-called Beachy Head woman from Sussex was also a black African from Roman times. When they tested her DNA at the Crick Institute, they found, of course, that she was actually from southern Europe, probably Cyprus. I thought the viewers might find this little excursion interesting because it does show that when it comes to promoting the right racial theories, modern anti-racists and left-wingers are every bit as in favour of using pseudoscience as the Nazis were. They are using pseudoscience to promote ideology rather than real science.